Good afternoon, everyone. I am Kuduz Oluwatoyin Adebayo and research coordinator of the African Diaspora Resource and Research Center based at the University of Ibadan. We are happy to welcome you all to our Burning Issues Series, which we are going to be learning more about. Essentially, it's a conversation, a style event that is set up as events permit, and we are hoping to have a space where we can discuss serious issues affecting diaspora across the world, African diasporas across the world, particularly also Nigerian diaspora, wherever they might be. And our topic for today is matters are rising, xenophobia beyond Nigerian traditional institution, but beyond institution of traditional leadership in South Africa. And on behalf of the African Diaspora Resource and Research Center at the University of Ibadan, I warmly welcome you to the first edition. So today's discussion is inspired by recent tensions in South Africa surrounding the installation of an Igbo traditional leader in Eastern Cape. But it's also more about the broader question, this development about migration, belonging, citizenship, xenophobia, and contemporary African condition. So these incidents, of course, reflect continuing tensions that complicates the ideals of Pan-Africanism, solidarity, and African coexistence. And our session today provides an opportunity to critically examine the political, economic, social, and cultural dynamics shaping relationships between migrants and host communities in South Africa, while also reflecting a serious issue about the future of African integration and diaspora engagement. Please kindly mute yourself when you come in. Um, Apologies. I'm trying to. Okay. Yeah, Ruka, kindly be on the lookout for unmuted individuals that you can put in the waiting room. Okay, thank you. So, the center therefore provides an opportunity to critically engage all these issues, and we are honored to have with us these distinguished speakers, bringing perspectives from migration, governance, diaspora leadership, and academic research. So before we go ahead, I would like to first of all do or welcome a very brief opening remark from our partner at the center, ADRRC, which will be given by Dr. Abdulrahman Terab, who is also part of our conversation today. So he's going to be speaking on behalf of the Chairman CEO of Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Honorable Abike W. Erewa. So, Doc, you have a very few 2 minutes to sort of give a quick welcome before we go ahead and introduce the speakers of today. You're welcome. So you can unmute yourself, Dr. Terab. Okay, so I believe it's having some issues. So maybe I'll just go ahead. So the speaker for our topic today, we have four speakers, and the first person that will be speaking on this topic today is Dr. Abdurrahman Abba Terab, who is the Director of Technology Transfer, Innovation and Investment at the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission. He's a distinguished scholar practitioner. He holds a PhD in public policy and strategy from the University of Abuja and a PhD in marketing from Nasarawa State University. His career spanned high-level legislative and executive service, including tenure as member of the Nigerian House of Representatives and a commissioner for finance in Borno State. As a traditional leader, Dr. Terab uniquely bridges formal governance and community advocacy, focusing on diaspora mobilization and protection of Nigerian interests globally. Our second speaker is Reverend Frank Oyekwelu, who is a businessman, entrepreneur, and community leader specializing in real estate development and mortgage financing. Through his company, established over 15 years ago, Reverend Frank Oyekwelu has supported many Africans and South Africans in achieving home ownership. He currently serves as the President General of the Nigerian Citizen Association, South Africa, where he leads initiative focused on welfare of Nigerians in South Africa. He also focuses on community unity and strengthening relations with South African communities. So Reverend Oyekwelu is also a senior pastor at Freedom Embassy Ministries International and an advocate for diaspora engagement and community development. Our third speaker for today, Dr. Silindile Mlilo, is a migration scholar and consultant specializing in migration governance, xenophobia, and social cohesion, and youth policy in Africa. She is a senior research associate at Toronto Metropolitan University's Global Migration Institute and formerly managed the very influential project, XenoWatch project, at the University of the Witwatersrand in South Africa. A co-founder of Meraki Afrique. Her work focuses on migration, citizenship, belonging, and post-colonial statehood in Southern Africa. She holds a PhD in migration and displacement from Wits University and is a 2024 Next Gen Dissertation Completion Fellowship and Erasmus Mundus Scholar. You are welcome, Dr. Milelo. Our fourth speaker, not the least, of course, is Ndubisi Martins Anemeka, who is a Nigerian scholar, poet, and public intellectual, currently completing a PhD at Charles University, Prague. His research focuses on Anglophone literatures, diaspora, memory, politics, and post-colonial studies, and African Black literary theory. He has lectured internationally and co-edited Critical Perspectives on Nduka Otino in 2024, writing under his pen name Ndubisi Martins. He is the author of One Call, Many Answers, and Answers Through the Bramble, longlisted for the 2022 Power Prize for Poetry. His forthcoming poetry collection, Promenades, will be released in 2026. So without further ado, I would like to use this opportunity to invite again Dr. Terab, if he's available now, to quickly give his welcome. And then after which I'm going to bring in our moderator for today, which is Professor Shenayola Lua, the director of the center, to come in and moderate the conversation. Dr. Terab?
Yes.
All right, you're welcome, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you
Good
very
afternoon.
much.
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Yes, we can hear you. Please, you have the floor, sir.
I'm just coming in. Have I been called?
Yes. Apologies. Yes. I called you to quickly give your opening remark, after which I'm going to bring Professor Nayo in to moderate the conversation. We've done a bit of introduction, so it's you now to give your welcome on behalf of Madam Dabiri. Oh, did you hear what I said, Dr. Terab? I think he's having an issue with his connection. Yes.
Hello? Are you hearing me now?
Yes, I can hear you now, please.
Okay. So can I go ahead?
Yes, please go ahead. 2 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to present the opening remarks of the Honorable Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, the Honorable Dr. Abike Dabiri-Arewa over here, at the maiden edition of the Africa Diaspora Research and Resource Center Burning Issues Series. First, I would like to extend her sincere apologies for her inability to be here, as she is currently in Kigali, Rwanda, with the president. And they are about to hold a town hall meeting with members of the diaspora. So from now on, I read her remarks. Distinguished Director of the Africa Diaspora and Research Center, esteemed panelists and scholars, members of the press, fellow Africans at home and in the diaspora. It is a profound pleasure to flag off this maiden edition of the Burning Issues Series, organized by the Africa Diaspora Resource and Research Center, the University of Ibadan, and the ADRRC for creating this timely platform to dissect the social frictions that threaten our collective vision for a unified continent. Today's discourse focuses on the rising tide of anti-immigrant rhetoric and xenophobic tensions. It's not merely an academic exercise. It is a matter of urgent national and continental survival. We are witnessing a paradoxical era where, despite the legal strides of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and the AU Agenda 2063, the social license for Africans to live and thrive in other African nations is being challenged by populist narratives and resource-based anxieties. The recent controversies in South Africa and the recurring hostilities in various host communities serve as a wake-up call. We must realize that xenophobia is often a proxy for deeper structural issues: demographic pressures, climate-induced migration, and a deficit in institutional capability. As we will hear from our distinguished speakers, including our own, Dr. Abdurrahman Terab, we cannot treat these issues and these attacks in isolation. At NIDCOM, our stance remains clear. African diaspora is a developmental asset, not a cultural or economic threat. To bridge the current trust deficit, we must move toward an African competitive synergy framework. This means shifting from zero-sum mentality to one where the success of a migrant community is seen as a catalyst for the prosperity of the host community. As we begin this series, I challenge the panelists and participants to look beyond the headlines. Let us explore how we can build trust proxies, stronger diplomatic coordination, shared economic interests, and digital narratives that celebrate our interdependence rather than our divisions. I look forward to the stimulating and impactful conversation promised today. It is only through such honest engagement that we can ensure that Ubuntu moves from a theoretical elite concept to a lived reality for every African on the continent. On this note, I formally declare this session open. Thank you very much, and God bless Africa. the Honorable Dr. Abike Dabiri Erewa, OON, Chairman, Chief Executive Officer, Nigerian Diaspora Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the warm and uplifting message. Without further ado, I would like to now invite Professor Sinayo Olaoluwa to begin the moderation. Kindly note that we'll be taking all your comments and questions in the comment section. So as they come to you, please use the comment function to put in your questions and comments. We will take as many of these as possible. But for now, Professor Sinayo Olaoluwa, over to you. And welcome.
All right. Thank you very much. Will the host please enable video? So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome us to this maiden edition of our new series, Burning Issues. We will, as a matter of tradition, that will begin to invent today, come up here from time to time to address issues that are of concern, topical issues that concern the African diaspora, and of course, as well as the African homeland. As a matter of fact, we are interested in the global African diaspora. And so, as these issues come up, we will continue to address them. This is an initiative, a collaborative initiative of the Diaspora and Transnational Studies program at the Institute of African Studies, University of Ibadan, and the it is very clear that the partnership is determined to provide flagship understanding of diaspora in both in theory and practice. And so this is the second series at the center, the other one being a monthly seminar series. Today, we are inaugurating this series with the topic, Matters Arising, Xenophobia Beyond Nigerian Diaspora Institutions of Traditional Leadership in South Africa. A couple of weeks ago, precisely sometime in March 2026, protests erupted in the Eastern Cape of South Africa on account of what was considered the unauthorized inauguration of a traditional title emanating from among Nigerians in diaspora in that region of South Africa. The person installed into the traditional leadership as the Igwendi Igona East London was Solomon Ogbonna Ezike. In itself, the institution of the traditional monarchy was not seen as inherently bad, but it was tagged illegal. And so it provoked violent chain reactions, leading to the looting of property owned not only by Nigerians, but other African immigrants in that region. And gradually, and up to this moment, the protest has snowballed into some kind of nationwide protest, which then becomes, going by the history of xenophobia in South Africa, the latest, considering that the protests go back to as far back as 2008 or even earlier than that. And I can even remember that as far back as that 2008, I was a doctoral student at the University of the Witwatersrand, and at some point, the university had to mobilize um, its population to protest against those actions of violent attack on immigrants who were predominantly from other African countries. And so today we are then looking at this issue of South Africa from a broader perspective that goes back into the past, looks at the present as the latest edition or version, which is considered to have been provoked, as it were, by the installation of a Nigerian traditional ruler. And we will also consider at the same time the tomorrow of it, the future. What does it hold? But before we bring our discussants into this conversation, it is important to also try to acknowledge the fact that xenophobia is not peculiar in its history to South Africa, because before we began to witness the contemporary xenophobic tensions in South Africa, we had earlier ones, say the 1969 illegal immigrant eviction in Ghana, which was a mass, if you like, deportation or expulsion, because of an expulsion order of West Africans in the main, because at that point, which is a fact, a point we will come back to, Ghana was like at a breaking point, and the system could no longer support the explosive number of West African immigrants. And that took place in the late 60s. And then again, by the early 80s, Nigeria also responded or reacted similarly, resulting in the notorious phenomenon, Ghana must go. It is against such backdrop that we'll begin to look at the non-peculiarity of what is taking place in Nigeria, in South Africa today. But at the same time, by bringing these historical precursors into conversation with what we are witnessing in the present, a question arises, critical in its conception, and that is that how is the discourse of xenophobia connected, as it were, to the question of development? Once we begin to look at this from this perspective, we are going to realize that perhaps, in my own thinking, xenophobia is a question of development. Development itself was some kind of model that was imposed in a capitalist formation on the African continent at the inception of colonization. But we shouldn't forget that development from this angle has to also be considered from the perspective of its Western homeland. Since we are in a center of diaspora studies, permit me to go via that route, so that the development Africa has been aspiring towards achieving is a model that was invented in Western Europe. And by its texture and history, the Western model of development has always been about unequal development. And that is why in most cases, sometimes there is a way we invoke Western Europe as though the rest of Europe will not matter. And that is what development does. It creates unequal development to the extent that sometimes people ask, is the Iberian Europe also part of Europe? Because the standard is already set, which is what is obtainable, the indices obtainable in the West, in Western Europe. Now, there has been some kind of uncritical assimilation and implementation of that same model in Africa. And what has it translated to? It has translated to an experience of exclusive reality, exclusive happenings around xenophobia. So, sorry, around development. So that development has never gained momentum in Africa. It takes place occasionally. And so it is at best something that happens in isolation. In the 50s and 60s, development occurred in Ghana while leaving the rest of Africa, outside it. And so everybody then moved to Ghana until, the immigrant population became too overwhelming to bear for Ghana. And then development left Ghana from the late 60s and came to Nigeria precisely after the Civil War. And so in the 70s, Nigeria experienced what is referenced as the oil boom. And so the rest of West Africa, and of course, including our brothers and sisters fighting apartheid, not just in South Africa, but also in other South African nations, to Nigeria. And Nigeria accommodated them until the early 80s, when Nigeria also got to a saturation point. Because while the so-called index of development was manifest in Nigeria, it was dead and absent in all other parts of the continent. And so when Nigeria got to the saturation point, it exploded again, and we had Ghana must go, which was a synonym for the rest of the immigrants. By the 1990s, apartheid had begun to collapse, and South Africa, that was formerly a closed country, became open to the rest of the world, especially the rest of Africa. And so Africans began to move in more substantially after the installation of Mandela as the first multiracial president. And then, close to about a decade, we had the same crisis again. And ever since, we have had different versions, different editions, different incidents, periodic incidents of xenophobia. What does this say about our understanding of development? What does it say about the imperative of reinventing the notion of development in such a way that it do not be an critical implementation of what was handed, the capitalist model handed over to us from the West, so that development can gain momentum, following the model of Ubuntu, so that it's not just only one country having it at a time. Let it go round. It is also important to also take cognizance of the common index of these three nations. Their so-called development has been driven, as it were, by extractive industrialization. And we all know that the economy of extraction hardly favors those involved in it, meaning that we have to transcend, this instinctual level of heavy reliance on mining, on extraction generally, to be able to move on to a sustaining model of development that will also gain momentum. Because let's take a look at it. Most of the South Africans interviewed will tell you, let these Africans go back to their countries. Let other African nations develop their own countries. And we cannot, undermine. If the level of development, so-called, in South Africa is replicated in about 20 other African countries at the same time, definitely the immigrant population pressure on South Africa will not have occurred. And with that, there would have been less pressure, there would have been less tension, which also brings us to the question of, since most or the main target, the target population is the Black population, immigrant population from other countries, we may then even ask ourselves, is what we are witnessing in South Africa xenophobia or Afrophobia? Ladies and gentlemen, these are preliminary commentaries from my end, which I reckon can serve as how we go into this conversation. And on that note, I would like to welcome our discussant and open the floor. Each member will have an initial 10 minutes to join in this conversation, and thereafter we will commence the fireworks that will also go hand in hand as well with questions and answers and all. So once again, it's my pleasure to welcome our speakers and to say we are getting started with the very first round of this conversation. So it will be Dr. Sindile Melilo first, to be from Canada, to be followed by Reverend Franklin Onyenkwelu from South Africa, and then we will have Dr. Abdurrahman Terab from Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, and finally, Ondubisi Martins Aniemeka from France. Sindile, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm not sure if you can see me and can hear me.
Oh,
yes, we can hear you. We can see you.
We can hear you.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I wasn't expecting to go first based on the list of the speakers, but yes, thank you for this opportunity. It's morning this side, so I'm assuming it's evening time in Nigeria. As I was introduced, I'm Slindile Mlilo, and I've been working on these issues formerly when I was based in South Africa. And I think this is a very interesting and timely topic, given what is currently going on and the recent events that have been mentioned regarding the issue that happened with the installation of the traditional leader, which was reframed by the media as a coronation, which obviously, as has been mentioned, led to an escalation of violence and attacks on foreign shops in the Eastern Cape. I think for me, my input on this discussion is that as timely and important as this discussion is, I think we should be careful to avoid framing or reducing it to an issue only that affects South Africans and Nigerians. I think there is, there is an issue that Nigerians are affected, are part of a group that affected or experienced xenophobic, whether discrimination or violence in South Africa, but so do a broader community of migrants living in South Africa, and also South Africans themselves who are considered as outsiders. I say this because I want to move from these binary or polarized discussions so that it doesn't become, or we don't frame it as a Nigeria versus South Africa issue. I think these issues on the ground are symptomatic of broader structural issues around economic exclusion, unemployment, weak governance, inequality, and really a fragile, state that experiences issues of social cohesion or fragile social cohesion within these communities. So when thinking about this from a broad perspective, I think obviously this falls under issues around migration governance and management, and really addressing structural failures where we are seeing that foreign nationals have become symbolic scapegoats for structural and economic issues that the government fails to address, where there's competition within these communities around informal trade, where foreign nationals are accused of, taking over the spaza shop or township economy. Foreign nationals are accused of, stealing jobs, stealing South African women, all these kind of like, biased or sometimes untrue and unfounded accusations that are leveled against foreign nationals. Also issues around access to services that foreign nationals are crowding, for example, healthcare services. Beginning of the year, we also had issues of, for example, March and March, which was blocking foreign children from accessing education because of claims that foreign nationals are basically taking the spaces of South Africa. So within all of this, we've seen that on the ground, there's emerged, as I said, vigilante groups that have also taken the law into their own hands, or have taken issues into their own hands by actually labeling themselves as trying to fix matters that government is not addressing. And this has obviously led to them, we've seen, if you've been following the news in South Africa, we've seen that this has led to, blocking of, especially particularly last year, blocking of individuals from accessing healthcare services, blocking of foreign nationals or people without identification, and also the issue that I mentioned with schooling. So it's led to such groups dominating these conversations and actually being at the forefront center of this. And despite civil society organizations' interventions to show that these claims are inaccurate, that these issues are, as I said, broader concerns of structural issues that are facing South Africa right now, we see that these fall into deaf ears. And I think there are many layers to this conversation, because as I said, also when we're bringing the media, issues around mis and disinformation also play into some of these tensions that we're seeing that are being leveled on the ground. Like I said, the framing of this ceremony in the media was termed as a coronation. And obviously in South Africa, as those who are very, very well versed with the context would appreciate, that traditional leaders, especially in the Eastern Cape and the KwaZulu-Natal, are not just seen as ceremonial leaders. They actually have an influence in some political issues. And so this became a discussion around encroachment of sovereignty, respect of, South Africa's cultural structures and traditional structures. So, just not to be long-winded, but I think what we're seeing happening in South Africa is not unique to what's actually happening broadly from a broader perspective around xenophobia, I think, or discrimination against migrants or anti-migrant sentiments. I think we're seeing it play out in different contexts. We see it in Europe, we see it in America. I think the particular attention to South Africa has been that xenophobia in particular has manifested to violence, where we've seen loss of lives, where we've seen, individuals losing property, displacement, and, real economic, impact, in the sense that when spaza shops are destroyed, it only not affects the income that these businesses have, but also even South African nationals who own businesses. So I think it's also important to talk about these discussions in relation to also how these communities are, working on the ground, in the sense that these incidents are not only affecting, foreign nationals or Nigerians, for example, but they are also affecting local South Africans on the ground. And I think one of the things that I also wanted to talk about was that also to underscore from my work with xenophobia in South Africa, as mentioned, is that we largely frame these issues around xenophobic violence as an issue of Afrophobia. I do agree that there are foreign nationals from African countries that are targeted, but our data from XenoWatch also shows that foreign nationals from other nationalities are also affected. We also have Pakistani, Bangladeshi nationals or nationals from other Asian countries who are living in South Africa, who are coexisting in these communities and are also affected by foreign nationals. Are affected by the issue of xenophobia. And I think the challenge with, for example, what we see where, the labeling of Nigerians being specifically targeted, and this is not to say that Nigerians are not. I'm just trying to frame the discussion, the broader issues, that it's broadly mainly foreign nationals who are targeted. It's not specific to a certain country or nation, but I do acknowledge that when it comes to, for example, Nigerian nationals, the frequent stereotypes around Nigerians are those of either those who are economically dominant, seen as entrepreneurial, are also on the other side, conversations around those who are affected with organized crimes, accused of all sorts of, insidious crimes like, trafficking, peddling drugs, etc., etc. And the challenge with that is that, it's not to condone crime, but to say that the problem with xenophobia is that it labels one sect of one individual committing a crime and puts a blanket,
Three
on
minutes more, please.
nationality, which is wrong. And I think that the frustration around that is that it's often directed to, which then creates a sense of like stereotypes around the nation with some of these frustrations that you see on the ground. And I think when we talk about Pan-Africanism, I think most of the time we talk about these labels where, yes, Nigeria played a big role, and much as African countries also played a big role in terms of, ensuring that South African leaders at that time who were fleeing from apartheid struggles in terms of the contributions that were played. And I think those are very important in terms of being recognized and acknowledged. But the challenge with these issues is that these tensions are manifesting from the ground. And some, these concepts that we talk about, Ubuntu and Pan-Africanism, as much as they're important, as much as they should be ingrained in the fiber of what it means to be an African, the challenge is that what's happening on the ground is people who are operating in these spaces on the ground don't really care about these issues. And I think part of talking about these discussions is also framing it against the broader legitimate concerns that affect ordinary South Africans as well as those that affect foreign nationals. And I think the middle ground for me would be, above and beyond fixing the structural issues like, the economic issues and looking at the migration system, I think it's also coming up with structures on the ground that ensure that there's social cohesion, that cities are inclusive and accommodative of everyone, and that some of these debates are actually embedded in grassroots interventions, and coming up with solutions where both foreign nationals and migrant communities find ways to coexist on the ground, because that's where some of the boiling or issues actually manifest from the ground up. So I think I'll stop there because I've said a mouthful, but I'm happy to continue engaging further.
All right. Thank you very much, Selinde, for the very brilliant and exciting interventions, and for how informing they've been. So many issues have been raised, from media framing to how the violent attacks, outbreaks also affect not only immigrants but also locals, and it's not only about Nigerians. Even when the conversation tends to be predominantly about Nigerians, possibly because of their population, and we also do know that others are affected, and because of people of other nationalities from Pakistan and other places are affected. The you know, reference or preference of the term Afrophobia becomes problematic for cylinders. But above all, we discover that these are issues around, you know, economic challenges, and there ought to be conversations between both migrants and locals on how to address these issues. One particularly striking um, view from her intervention is the fact that the local ordinary South Africans involved in these anti-immigrant actions don't even care about the history or values of Pan-Africanism, which um, I see as so consciously expressed because thereafter issues around education or social cohesion, so everybody can understand how best to address these issues. Certainly, thank you very much. At this point, I would like to quickly invite Reverend Frank Onyekwelu to take the floor. And yeah, Cindy has been really, time conscious. Sir, could you do it in 8 minutes for us? Reverend Frank, you have the floor.
Why reducing my time?
Never mind. In the end, Cindy didn't even spend up to the 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, Senayan.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you so much.
Yes, sir.
Greetings to all our viewers. Good evening from this part of the world, and I believe it's also evening in Nigeria. Thank you so much for inviting me and the entire Nigerian community and the globe for this program, and much appreciated to the hosts and all our representatives, the panel of discussion. The subject matter that we are discussing tonight, it's really vast and quite engaging, considering the current wave of protest and the xenophobic activities in South Africa. Perhaps I would like to start from the standing point that what we're experiencing now, it's not new. It does not originate from this just this year or this installation of the Igbo title or installation of the Igbo king. If we recall, it's dated back from 2008, going into 2015, 2019, and then this recent one. All these have been series of xenophobic protest attacks targeting migrants, especially African migrants in South Africa. And we can see that it is something that always pop up from time to time, especially when the locals or the citizens wishes to express their frustrations or the challenges they experience from the hands of the governance. And some of these challenges, you can tell they are coming out from areas like unemployment, crime that they are speaking against within the country, border management, the border controls, and also public resources, economical challenges. These are all compounding, bringing together to the problem. And so one can tell that some of these challenges, every other country goes through it. However, in my view and in our position as a community residing in South Africa, it is clearly not noticeable that sometimes foreign African migrants are blamed for these socio-economic challenges. And when such blame comes up, especially when political leaders drives a narrative towards this direction, make some comments in the public or in the media blaming the African migrants for the reasons of a failed service delivery or lack of jobs or employment or public resources, then the locals takes it upon themselves to act on these narratives, on these statements. This is not far from what we are seeing currently in South Africa. Yes, there was an installation of Igbo King in the Eastern Cape, East London, but that was a mere title ceremony. Of course, it was blown out of context by the media, by some political parties, and by some narratives that brought in hate, giving wrong presentation of the installation. Let me use this opportunity to also set the record straight. There was no ceremonial kingship practice that was done. There was no kingdom established. It was a mere Igbo cultural heritage, passing down the cultures, the heritage, and the traditions of Igbo people from the eastern part of Nigeria. Having found ourselves in the diaspora, there are children, there are youth, there are wives that are married to this particular group of ethnicity. And so from time to time, the group of Igbos come together to share their values, their customs, their traditions, and perhaps make the new generation, the youth, the young one, the women's, get them exposed to this knowledge. It is one of these kinds of incidents that in a particular location or geographical position, they look at a patriotic citizen of such Igbo extraction who has contributed immensely to the well-being and the development of the Southeasterners, and then they confine with such person a title in the form of recognizing him as the leader of this particular set of Igbos in that area. However, this ceremony was conducted not with any intention of sharing sovereignty with South African traditional rulers and the installed kings, but it was with the understanding of teaching and educating the youths, the wives, and the children of Igbo extraction that were born in a foreign land to understand their root, their cultures, and the basis of becoming an Igbo man or woman. Now, having established that, it was on this ground that the media speculations, narratives turned into provocation to the locals. And then the new wave of protest, march and march, that we are seeing today began, which now spread from one province to the other, raising another wave of xenophobic, because the subject matter was taken out of context, and the whole narrative became that foreigners are stealing our jobs,
You have 3
marrying
minutes
our
more,
wives,
sir. 3 minutes more, sir.
exhausting our resources, and then the attack began. However, it is something that we need to understand that government and governance need to do more in order to increase or improve service delivery to the people, especially in the management of border control, especially in the documentation process of foreign nationals coming into the country, whether they are Africans, Europeans, or Americans. With a proper documentation like this, it will be very easy to differentiate between documented migrants and undocumented migrants. We also look at how criminality is addressed from our position as NECASA that represents the Nigerian community here. We continue to establish that it is properly wrong to criminalize a nationality because of one or two few that does something. Crime has no nationality, and we stand to obey the rule of law and to express that anyone that commits crime, whether Nigerian, South Africa, Zimbabwean, or foreign national, such a person should be brought before a competent court of law and should face the music of the law. But nationalizing a particular nation, like what we've seen, anytime crime is come upon, Nigerians are targeted. And we are saying that it shouldn't be so.
Thank you very much, sir. We thank you, Reverend Onyenkwelu, for the brilliant intervention, that takes us through critical perspectives that build on St. Linda's initial intervention. One particularly striking part of your delivery for me is the discussion around neoliberalism, because South Africa at the how do I put it now, the collapse of apartheid was imagined, conceived of to be a welfare state where there will be free services for all, free houses and all. But shortly after the installation of Mandela, the economic policy was changed from that of a welfare state to that of neoliberalism, whereby the benefits of the struggle will only come to the people through the trickle-down effect, which ultimately pitches the people, the ordinary people, against the black political elite. But the black political elite have developed some kind of strategy that takes advantage of the popular ignorance of these people to deflect the blame, because the hardship that the ordinary South Africans experience is something that emanates from the economic policy adopted by the political elite, neoliberalism against welfarism. But because the ordinary South Africans lack the capacity to understand the sophistication of the elite complicity against them, every time it is the foreigners they see around them, who are most generally as powerless as they are, fellow dispossessed foreigners, that become the target. And that tells us something about the imperative of engaging the leadership to face up to the realities to address these issues. In reality, Mr. Onyenkwelu is also able to let us know that there was nothing like any installation. It was just a ritual process of becoming, for those who are of Igbo extraction, the way other diaspora groups, come together as a way of bonding to symbolically link the diaspora with the homeland. Questions of service delivery on the part of the South African institutions up to matters of proper documentation, and the fact that it is absolutely necessary to address those criminal elements in the system rather than referring to all immigrants as criminals in the system. I would like to thank you once again, Reverend Onyenkwelu. At this point, I would like to invite Dr. Abdurrahman Terab from Nigerians in Diaspora Commission for his intervention. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much,
yes,
my colleagues, panelists, but specifically Professor Shenayo, for helping to effectively moderate this session. Let me go straight to the point. I'm taking cue from your initial presentation, Professor Shenayo. The issue that we are discussing here, and of course, I would also like to take a cue from Silinde, my earlier colleague, that this is beyond just South Africa and Nigeria, while this is the context. But the reality is that these are after effects, not just of having migrant communities, but of what I will term as either a failure or a drop in developmental indices in most of these communities. So we look at treating xenophobia and isolation ignores the systematic pressures that transform social friction into communal violence. As the reality of African communities shifts under the weight of global and local stressors, these accelerants or factors redefine the relationship between host communities and migrant populations. I have observed 4 of such what I call shifting realities. One is the demographics, the youth bulge versus resource stagnation. The demographic reality of Africa is characterized by a youth bulge, a massive population of young people entering the labor market. So what is the shift? The shift is that when the rate of job creation fails to keep pace with population growth, foreigners are no longer seen as neighbors, but as competitors for a finite pool of opportunities. So what is the effect? The effect is that this creates a demographic pressure or pressure cooker where frustration is directed at migrant communities who are perceived to be crowding out locals in the informal economy, such as retail and street vending. Now, climate change is the second shifting reality. The rise of climate refuge, if you want to call it that way. Climate change is a primary driver of involuntary migration across the continent, particularly from the Sahel to coastal regions. So this shift is resource scarcity, like water, arable land, and grazing paths, forces pastoralists from farmers to cross national borders in search of survival. The effect, again, is that this forces proximity often leads to clashes over land and communal resources. Host communities already struggling with their own climate-induced economic hardships view these climate refugees through a lens of suspicion, leading to environmental xenophobia, where the migrant is blamed for the strain on local ecosystem. The third shift is prosperity appropriation. That's how I call it, prosperity appropriation. It actually aligns with the zero-sum fallacy. Prosperity appropriation refers to how wealth and success are perceived and distributed within a community. So what is the shift here? In many African urban centers, migrant communities, often through grit and network-based financing, establish successful small businesses. And what is the effect? The effect is that host communities may perceive these successes not as a contribution to the local economy, but as a theft of local prosperity. This is the zero-sum fallacy. The belief that for a migrant to prosper, a local must become poorer. This narrative is frequently weaponized by populist leaders to divert attention from state failures in wealth distribution. And I think Frank Onyekelu captured that very well. The capabilities of communities is the fourth shifting reality, the institutional trust deficit. And that was why I started with the statement that it is the after effect. This refers to the ability of local and state institutions to fulfill their obligations to citizens with regards to security, justice, and social safety nets. So what is the shift? When the state lacks the capability to provide basic services to citizens, they often turn to self-help or vigilante groups. In this case, we have issues like the Operation $2 in South Africa to regulate their own communities. And the effect is, unfortunately, xenophobia becomes a symptom of state incapacity. When the police cannot provide security or the courts cannot provide justice, the foreigner becomes an easy, visible scapegoat. Communities with low institutional trust are more likely to utilize violence as a tool for social control, viewing the migrant as a threat.
3 minutes more.
Okay, viewing the migrant as a threat to an already fragile social order. So the summary is the proxy crisis. As highlighted, credibility crisis for Pan-Africanism. If the African diaspora is viewed as a cultural threat rather than a developmental asset, the goals of the African Continental Free Trade Area and the AU Agenda 2063, which rely on the free movement of persons, remain at risk. To counter this, the focus must shift to building trust proxies. One, economic and cultural frameworks that prove the presence of migrants actually enhances the capabilities and prosperity of host communities rather than depleting them. So based on this, some strategic analysis of current African social dynamics cites the story of one, the migrant behavioral loop, attitude and integration. Migrant communities usually live in enclaved communities. These are things that we need to improve on because it creates trust issues. Sometimes host communities do not understand that migrants are hustlers, are strugglers. They can easily come together and create wealth and help provide solutions to host communities. But they see that as threat in most cases. That needs to be overcome. The state's incapacity narrative is a major issue in this regard. When service delivery fails, frustration of local politicians now moves the frustration of people towards migrant communities. And they think you don't have water because of migrant communities, you don't have healthcare because of migrant communities, and so on. And then you have the governance vacuum. In absence of strong institutions, vigilante groups and nativist movements step in to fill the role of state. These groups justify their existence by claiming to protect the rights of citizens against invaders. In quote, a narrative that thrives only because the formal state has left a vacuum of capability. Now, okay, so I think the most important thing finally is that the African Union, specifically in this regard, needs to build social contract. The social contract license is disconnected with African policies. Because what happens is that you have a policy where the local communities of respective African countries are not connected with that reality. And that becomes an issue.
In the second round.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
With that, I'll be waiting to take further observations.
Yes, Dr. Terab, clearly each discussant has come fully loaded. So we'll have a second round, and it is quite exciting to see the coherence in your interventions, talking about issues around youth bulge, leading to frustration on the immigrants when the pressures are much, issues around climate change, as being inclusive of what factors have contributed, as it were, to these pressures on the host communities. And then it is important to address this critical fact, which I guess I would like to invite you to return later: prosperity appropriation. Immigrants take advantage of the informal economy and exhibit their resourcefulness to creating wealth. And once that happens, it's so easy for the locals to engage in the zero-sum fallacy that, oh, they are taking our jobs, and this continues to happen. But then institutions have also been found to be wanting in post-apartheid South Africa. And as Reverend Onyekwelu said earlier on, the next thing the government does is to incite the people against the immigrants. If water supply is no longer constant, then it's because of the pressure from the immigrants. Whereas the institutions have to do more than this. Over and above all, and as is expected of him as a director in the Nigerians in the Diaspora Commission, he would re-emphasize the place of diaspora right from the overall view of the African Union as a developmental asset. When these xenophobic attacks persist, the realization of the potential of the African diaspora as a developmental asset will be impossible. Once again, thank you very much, Dr. Terab. Finally, we shall at this point invite Martins to take the floor, and we'll have you in the next 10 minutes or thereabout. Honorable Martins, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Professor Serayon Olaoluwa. I'd have to enter this conversation from maybe cultural philosophy slash thinking with Mbembe in some way, actually Mbembe in some way. I think more of the, I do not want to restrict this conversation to just the prejudice and the machinery of violence that xenophobia causes. But I'd like us to examine the underlying current in this xenophobic attack, this spate of xenophobic attack. We think quickly of that the way fear mobilizes some kind of state machinery to summon Black South Africans towards hating and towards, of course, thinking that the foreigner becomes a disposable body. that itself has this necropolitical dimension to it, and we'd have to look at it and how does this really affect the whole idea of African, the African being who after apartheid, there's ought not to be a site of conflict after a sustained regime of apartheid, where race and color became taboo discourses, things that made the minority white hacked, jailed, and systematized violence on the black body. Here, there's a shift between the black body and another black body. I'm not thinking of any African, quickly, I'm not thinking of any African as a foreigner in any African society, basically. The sloppy border regimes in African continent would make for something really atrocious, something pathetic, because if we think of the fact that the idea of Ubuntu it stemmed from the Southern African cultural epistemology, I should think that the government or the society, the government should have mobilized education to emphasize Ubuntu, that is brotherliness, cooperation, and all of these things do not exist as far as I'm concerned in South Africa. Of course, what you find is the existence is in theory, in cultural theory, maybe relevant for such conferences in Johannesburg and places in Zimbabwe, but the black body who by convenience of violence, of violent regime, becomes a threat to another black South African. It's something that we'd have to check the cultural layers of this. And if we think of Ubuntu and we think of the way there's now a shift from racial polarities in South Africa to what I might just, for want of description, call the assault on another black man or another African. So and if we check the economic indices, the economic relations, the internal tension that governs that space in South Africa, we also think of the Igbo culture, the Igbo proverb that I might just have to transliterate as let the kite perch, let the eagle perch. The one who says one should not perch, let the eagle, let the wing, let its wings break. That supposes aptly that we have a country, or we have a system of thinking in Africa that somewhat automatically enables the other. And in the post-colonial setting, what otherness is a function of identification of alienness, nativeness, ethnicity, all of these things, and such paradoxes of relations, human relations. So I do not expect that certain Africans would now become disposable beings, so that the machinery of violence is automatically activated in virtually the slightest provocation. Let's take, for instance, the coronation of the Igbo king, so to speak, in South Africa. The Igbo king in South Africa. That particularly is somewhat a vexing issue, because we know that across places in climes around the world, for instance, we have Yoruba traditional system, Yoruba culture, if distributed culturally to the Americas, South America, and all that. And therein, the Igbos as well exist everywhere. Other African nationalities exist everywhere. And I am thinking of why South Africa, and then it cannot, of course, be separated from that precarity that apartheid became for them. And so it is a factor of transferred violence from such history of bloodshed, in that relationship with between the white and the black South Africa. So such animosity has been reinvented, and it's nothing to some. It's something we can check within necropolitical dimension. Again, we return to actually Mbembe. So the state of exception and migrant invisibility is something that we just must look at as some kind of organizing the state against other foreign, what you would call foreign. I would not call it foreign, just very much like Mbembe wouldn't take that for a term within Africa, especially with the borderscapes and borderscapes of violence, permitted by such economic exclusions. So we, in the concept notes, you mentioned basically the zero-sum game, and I put it within this context. How do we have a zero-sum game in a Black community where shared successes, shared integration, economic empowerment should be the main focus? If economic development is distributed, of course, there's no question of inequality of economic development. But with the idea of Ubuntu, we did that shared mutual support. In fact, when you think of Nigeria supporting South Africa during apartheid, that brotherliness, that Ubuntu had been exhibited in the time past. And so I wouldn't know how much history is taught some of these young demographics in South Africa, because all of these cultural education cultural forms of education would have helped to douse that idea of xenophobia. If we think of how society, how the state, activates the machine of violence, that machine of violence, the directorate is something that helps to mobilize citizens, blacks, South African citizens to such violence. So it trickles down from the state agency through the Black South African, and we just might have to evaluate or review the process of cultural education in South Africa to think of better ways to ameliorate this very thorny issue and persistent idea of xenophobia. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for your intervention, which adopts a dimension of cultural critique, in which Mbembe comes up time and again from, the possibility of extending his notion of necropolitics to the rendition of the immigrant body as disposable which for me finds greater, you know, explanation in Mbembe's recent work on brutalism and how it is connected, you know, to neoliberal capitalism, which is always intent on reducing humans, this time immigrants, to um, energy, you know, that we just use,
Sure.
and atom and energy that we can just dispose of. And that becomes another way of looking at all this. And of course, the, you know, curious classification, um, though, you know, in a particularly, um, uh, in a way that, if you like, is not quite pleasant, of South Africa as some kind of state of exception, and how that does something in the form of serious brutalism to immigrants. I would like to thank you all. We'll have a second round, but each speaker will have only 2 minutes. I know there are things you may have forgotten, but because we will have to take question and answers, I have found a way of simplifying this task. Two issues, I have finally identified like two recurring issues, which I am going to divide between the four speakers. I would like us to begin with the question of what Dr. Terab has termed prosperity appropriation, and how this is at the heart of the crisis we have in South Africa. It's always these foreigners are taking our jobs. They are taking away our opportunities, and sometimes it can get to that extreme extent of they are taking our women. And all these are about issues around the zero-sum fallacy, and it is at the same time, in my thinking, connected to the elite conspiracy against immigrants. So I would want Dr. Terab and Reverend Oyekwelu in 2 minutes each to speak to this matter again. And in the last intervention, it will be Silinde and Martins, because there is also the recurrence of the imperative of education, Ubuntu, and all. How do we put all this together to address the question of xenophobia? So we'll begin with Terab and Oyekwelu. You have the floor in 2 minutes. Dr. Terab, please. Yeah, we are trying to hear you. We are still.
Okay.
Yes.
What about now?
Yes, it's better now. 2 minutes.
Okay. I think the issue of prosperity appropriation speaks directly to the zero-sum fallacy, because, like I said, the shift is that in many African urban centers, migrant communities establish successful business. And this is historical. It's not just in the context of our usually move out of their comfort zones to go and establish enterprises which ordinarily they couldn't have succeeded in their places. And the kind of community they meet in their host communities kind of helps in. However, host communities may perceive this success not as a contribution to the local economy, but so the way we see it is that the African Union needs to domesticate this deeply in the context of the African Union 2063 agenda, especially with regards to the issue of African continental trade area, free trade area. That's why I came with this theory of African competitive synergy framework, which is intended, one, to identify skills across all African cultural communities, and then most importantly, synergize them across other African communities. Now, this is intended to achieve what we call business in that regard. When you achieve the theory of competitive advantage, you create collaboration.
All right.
Instead of competition.
Thank you very much. Collaboration.
Thank you very much.
Instead of competition. Reverend Oyekwelu, in 2 minutes. In 2 minutes.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. I believe that what Dr. Teran is trying to explain is also strong evaluation. However, let me come from the perspective of South Africa before I can now generalize it into the entirely the African unity. I believe from the South African perspective, having understood that the cause of these challenges, it's not just the migrants, nor just the influx of different nationals or African nationals within African community. However, the solution might come from strengthening their border management and also improving their immigration process, the administration. In South Africa today, if we look at it deeply, there's a lot of backlog on the Home Affairs system, which is also something that has been misinterpreted and misrepresented. Now, if they can address that as quick as possible, it will help alleviate the challenges. I tell you this, many African or foreign African nationals that are here brings business, trade opportunities, developments, works that adds to the growth of the economy, that improves or increases on the economy. So it is something that if it's properly managed or addressed, it will bring the broader economic value that they are looking for. Then more so, on the African Union perspective, we need to strengthen the inter-African trade, intercontinental business, and some of our bilateral relations, so that from one country to another, the values of human life, the values of business trade, the values of cooperation, and generally growth of economical resources in Africa will improve drastically. I think if that is done, there will be less of these agitations and protests and more of economic growth.
Thank you very much for building on the interventions by Dr. Terab and linking it up to interagency collaboration, for the realization of immigrant value for development in the host countries as well as in the host land. Then that leads us to what I reference as the imperative of education or re-education that can come through, the philosophical template of Ubuntu in all this. How do we go about this? Silindile and Martins, in that order. 2 minutes each of you. Thank you very much. Silindile, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you so much. I think this philosophy of Ubuntu can partially address some of these issues, but I think teaching the philosophy itself, especially in schools, could potentially help reduce xenophobia, but it's not sufficient in itself. I think xenophobia in South Africa, as we've already discussed, is not merely an issue of moral failure. It's also rooted in the structural economic and inequality and political distrust, and also special exclusion that we're witnessing, issues of unemployment, weak governance, and social insecurity that my colleagues have also alluded to. So I think just this is not a one-size-fits solution. So it is important, yes, to underscore those values. And I think some of them already exist within the South African fiber, because our studies also show that in communities where there is inclusive practices, community leaders, they actually stand up and say, not on my watch, and prevent xenophobia. So I guess for me, the issue is that, yes, Ubuntu can shape values, but values alone cannot sustainably overcome, the economic hardships that ordinary South Africans experience, and also the institutional failures by government to address some of these systemic issues that we see. So I think unless Ubuntu is reflected in inclusive development at a national level, accountable governance and social justice, I think it risks, sorry, it's a tongue twister for me. It risks remaining an ethical and ideal that will be disconnected from the lived realities of the people on the ground.
Right. Thank you very much. The education is not enough. Ubuntu must be connected to inclusive economic structures and implementation. Absolutely. Martins Mbubusi,
Yeah,
on a final
perhaps
note.
I will speak more on the resonance, the digital reporting and news media. It's the directory of violence in South Africa, as reported by several media houses, can inflame xenophobia. So I think the government has to find a way to sensitize the media about their function. Their function is to create a society that that integrates all of these African values. Maybe that Ubuntu has to be distributed as a cultural imperative to the media house, and then of course content strategists as well. In Africa, most times now you find everywhere content strategy, or is it content people doing very very immaterial what you would call money spying talks, or body politics, things around sensuality and all that. And it tells of how the values have really dropped. Such I would suggest that content strategists produce things, because a mass audience, the internet users in Africa is said to be really large. Of course, in South Africa, if they produce such content that help treat the other African as human and not their life. I mean, to call back Jojo Agamben's Homo Sesa. And then, of course, that would reduce some of this political or necropolitical tension that xenophobia feeds on. And it's something that cultural production, all this content, small film,
All right, to the round up.
and all that, and of course, why that serves very important use in South Africa is South Africa, like Nigeria, is a place of cultural production. It is active. So I really don't know. I've been asking that question. Why South Africa? I would understand that of Ghana, really. But I mean, South Africa is supposed to be a place of cultural, activism and vibrant life, so to say.
Thank you very much. There is also the proposal for digital intervention as one way by which the cultural reorientation can be mediated. I'd like to thank you all for your informed and informing perspectives. At this point, we are throwing it open to members of the audience. We already have some questions that we may want to begin with. Others with questions should also raise their hands or send in more questions. We have only about 15 minutes more to go. And let me begin by looking at one question, I guess, that's directed at me, talking about foreigners, maybe immigrants really powerless. They have never been powerless. That's my simple answer because of what is called the immigrant agency. Even if you like, you call it sometimes the stranger agency. No matter how foreign you are, you always have your agency, and it is that informs how immigrants find opportunities where locals cannot, because migration itself is something that is intentional, and it is generally attributed to ambitions of prosperity, and there is how that drives the way immigrants everywhere in the world, thrive. There is another question here that challenges, the interrogation of terms such as xenophobia and Afrophobia in addressing the situation in South Africa right now. I'll throw that open to the discussants, and then what somebody is asking. There are multi-sector strategies to address xenophobia. I know that the discussants have been mentioning this, have been hampering on this since they began. I am just taking the first 3 or so questions that I'll throw open before we come to those raising their hands. So that somebody, for the purpose of emphasis, that it is good that we infuse this, into the younger folks, the sensibility or the consciousness of Ubuntu, I guess, for people to live together and have, a new orientation towards how to live together. I want our discussants to, anyone who feels free to address each of these questions, and shortly thereafter we will come to those raising their hands. So you have the floor, discussants, in 1 minute each. Thank you. Anybody can go first, please. Hello. Our discussants.
Okay. Can you?
Yes,
hello.
Hello. Yeah, hello.
Okay.
My camera?
Yes, Dr. Terap, let's have you.
Okay. My camera is locked from the admin side, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, never mind. But please just proceed.
Okay, then. Anyway, I think what we, especially looking at all the 3 questions, I just want to drive this very, very important point. It is unfortunate that we are discussing xenophobia in the current reality with respect to South Africa. However, I think in your opening remark, and some of my colleagues did mention, that this is a recurring phenomenon back into the 1960s, especially as history recorded from Ghana down to Nigeria, Guinea, Ivory Coast, South Africa. And also, let's not forget that these issues still exist culturally, even in our local communities. That's the reality. Now, we need to, as I said earlier, domesticate African Union policies. And I think Frank also alluded to that in his last response. The fact is that we must, for you to domesticate a policy, it has to be a social license contract between the people and the policymakers. Now, these policies exist in books, but have we as communities and cultural bodies in Africa agreed to that? Have we adopted that? Who has informed us? Someone is just talking about how we can get the youth or the younger ones on board.
1 minute over.
Okay, so basically, we need to domesticate our policies. We need to drive it along with the people. Today is South Africa. Tomorrow is going to be another area. And even in the same countries, we have these issues. So we as Africans must agree to adopt policies that is going to preach coherence, create collaboration, and make us greater as a single unit of force.
Thank you very much. Martin Sindubuisi, would you want to respond?
Yes. Basically, I was talking about the abolishment of borderscapes or border regimes in Africa. All of these things should be a policy discussion in ECOWAS or meetings of Council of States and others across the African nations. When we think of this policy approach, which of course should include resensitization. On that, I solidly stand on the Ubuntu philosophy. I'm not sure that many of these people harassing, you could say, attacking and destroying property of other African nationals in South Africa. I'm not sure they are aware of the historical trajectory, the way South Africa was supported during the apartheid regime. I'm not sure they are aware. So history should have been able to tell them that there should be no thinking, there should be no otherness within the Black community. I mean, Black is Black. No matter, like I want to re-echo, Achimbembe says that no matter the deportation, Black is Black. Black, there's no alien Black in South Africa, there's no alien Black in Nigeria, and it shouldn't recur in our society.
All right, thank you very much. Sindile, Onyekwelu, would you want to intervene here, or we'll move on to the next round of questions?
Okay, I think.
All right, Onyekwelu.
Let me add a few things. When we look at the word in Ubuntu, it means I am because we are. And so that word cannot be said to be true if we cannot coexist. Therefore, it will be very paramount for us to drive the Pan-Africanism, bringing the unity of Africa, the free mobility within Africa, and our shared destiny. We can completely minimize xenophobic or Afrophobic tendencies if we can understand one another, reinforce our unity, and deal with this fragmentation that is breaking and dividing us more. been able to trust one another and relate with economic nationalism, whereby this inter-trade bilateral agreement must not just be on paper or on signed offices or on televisions, on medias, but to see them practically being practiced within the African community. That will help a lot.
Thank you very much. Celine.
I just wanted maybe to address the question around the multi-sector strategies to addressing xenophobia. I think there's a lot of initiatives that are happening on the ground. We see that a lot of civil society organizations have actually taken organizations like Operation Tudula, for example, to court. We've seen attempts to take government to court around issues affecting migrant rights in South Africa. So there is a lot that's happening, but at the same time, civil society organization is fragmented as well in terms of their efforts and in terms of merging efforts to work together. So and one of the issues as well that we're seeing is that focusing the discussion around migrant rights or what migrants are entitled to sometimes polarizes the conversation, because South Africans also have legitimate concerns that affect them, which, as some of my colleagues have alluded to, unfortunately politicians take them as scapegoating. So in a situation where the topic is politically charged and where we see that the migrant conversation doesn't win votes, I think a shift towards inclusive cities or focusing on issues that affect local communities and migrants jointly is a start to moving the needle. Because the moment we talk about migrants versus locals, South Africans versus Nigerians, foreigners versus whatever, the debate remains polarized. And despite the efforts on the ground, not much is pushed at the political or policy level. So yeah, I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, thank you very much. The imperative of balance between the welfare of the locals and the migrants. So we'll take the three hands. Dr. Ngozi Uzoma, Mr. Shegun's iPhone, and then there is another iPhone. I hope we have only those three. So we'll begin with Dr. Uzoma. You have the floor, please, in 1 minute, because we have less than 5 minutes to go. Yes, Dr. Uzoma.
Okay, thank you. I'll be so fast, because I'm traveling and it's so loud. I hope I don't ground. And we talked so much about Ubuntu. The panelists, everybody's talking about Ubuntu, and Ubuntu was Nelson Mandela's grandson talked also about Ubuntu. When I met him at Toronto Metropolitan University, he talked about how other Africans helped Mandela to acquire African passport to travel all over Africa and the world, in order to facilitate resources to fight apartheid. And when I told him, I'm going to bring him to Nigeria also to talk about this Ubuntu, they agree with his handlers. And when I go further and says that one of the topics is also going to be about talking about xenophobia in Africa, they ghosted me and they never tried to contact me again. And I think supporters in Nigeria are saying that South African elites
we are running out of time.
Currency for election. So, and they are talking about boycotting MTN, which is economic interest of, for example, the president of South Africa here in Nigeria. So, in that view, is it right to do such economic boycott when Nigeria also needs economic development? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is boycott the answer at this moment? Let all our discussants take note of that. Shegun's iPhone, you have the floor. Quickly, in 1 minute.
Okay, Shegun Adegoke, I'm a retired assistant coordinator of immigration. My comment is about the solution as profiled by Dr. Abdulrahman on the domestication of African policies and Reverend Frank. First, you have to understand on border management and border control. apart from Nigeria and say British, you don't have professional immigration officers manning the borders of South Africa. You have policemen doing the job, and police is police. Today you can be in police duty, tomorrow you can be in. That is not justification for the system. And then as for solution, Dr. Abdulrahman said we should domesticate African policies. Okay, he did not tell us the African policies he's talking about. He's talking about only one after the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And I am now adding, okay, and I'm adding that we should look at adoption of the African Union passport, adopted by the AU in 2016 in Rwanda and Kigali, Rwanda.
All right,
with the African. Okay, thank you.
We will take note of that. And then the iPhone. Sorry, we don't have your name here. iPhone, and then Professor Ajumeze. So quickly, iPhone. Are you still there? iPhone, your hand is up. Otherwise, let's have Professor Ajumeze. Quickly, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Prof, for calling me up. So I'm trying to recall some of your foundational statements about xenophobia in Ghana and also what happened in Nigeria at the time. But I'm trying to also make sure that we do not gloss over the specificities of these kinds of experiences that happen in Ghana and that happen in Nigeria, and by which I mean that state policies that target foreign nationals within the framework of developmentalism, should be seen differently from what is happening today in South Africa. During the time of Buhari, I remember that the whole idea was for Nigeria to develop and foreigners need to leave. I didn't recall Nigerians marching on the streets, killing people. I do not still recall Ghanaians. I studied in Ghana, I studied in South Africa as well. I can't recall ordinary citizens killing people, black people. I do not recall that. I think we need to draw a clear line of distinction between what's happening in South Africa and what happened in other places. Even if you want to go back and think about it historically, I think it's completely different. I think South Africans are doing something that hasn't happened before. And I think we need to acknowledge this. And I think because we refuse to acknowledge it, there's a sense of, if you like, critical conspiracy, conspiracy of thought. I've alluded to this in my earlier post, some kind of conspiracy of scholarship, of theory, of all of these kinds of semantics all coming together to support what is happening in South Africa, or to gloss over it. Not to support it per se, but to gloss over it. But to make it seem as if it is not what it is. It is xenophobia. We might not, for example, be able to label what's happening in Nigeria, what happened in Nigeria, or what happened in Ghana in the same context as we will apprehend what is happening today in South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your time is up. So our discussants, you have a minute each because our time is actually up in principle. 1 minute each to these references. Yes.
The first question is about is boycott the answer? The idea of boycott was done to attract attention of government on the other side, so that the government should take action. The Nigerian government has been engaging the South African government on several cases in this regard. So sometimes you need to use a bit of carrot and stick measures and some punitive measures just so that you can get attention of the government to do the needful. The second question, specifically with Segun iPhone, that's the reason why I mentioned the AU Agenda 2063. Part of the AU Agenda 2063 is the adoption of a single passport. And we have also gone ahead to also enumerate and discuss the need for skill passport also across the African region. The idea is that if we want to achieve the AFCTA policy, nation states must have to domesticate it. And that includes integration, respecting other Africans, accepting them as collaborators to achieve a singular purpose. Thank you very much.
Very much.
You are muted.
Who goes next? Just 1 minute from each discussant. Uh, yes, yes.
All right.
Go
Yes,
ahead, Martin.
I was going to intervene in this, re-echo Professor Ajumeze's, comment the other time, and I think I did mention it a bit in my presentation. And what is happening is basically the problem of naming. They just want to hang on naming, but the act itself is happening. So it's a problem, really, because xenophobia is simply hatred and violence to another person perceived as the other or the alien or anything. So it is xenophobia. And so the failure to name it what it is or the failure to acknowledge it is a big problem, because it means that the government does not want to sanction perpetrators. We can see the denials of the spokesperson to President Ramaphosa the other time, who definitely denied that South Africa is xenophobic. This denial means that they are reluctant to pursue
Denialism
an end
is
to it.
not,
So
the
basically,
denialism is not going to help us. Let's face up to the realities. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you,
Philip,
leaders.
yes.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I greet my chairman and I greet
Oh,
everyone out
we
there.
thought you forfeited your time, but please do your question in just 1 minute, please.
Okay. I realize that most of our complaint has been about South Africa. I'm sure South Africa also have their own query also in between. However, there's nothing we can discuss according to my own understanding without getting close to our community. Our community is our community. South Africa is our host community, whether we like it or not. No matter the decision of federal government, if it's action, then if we take the STV MTN out of Nigeria tomorrow, that doesn't mean they will see us tomorrow, they will reduce our rent or they will use their opportunity to like us further. Meanwhile, the best and the thing that I've seen so far that could work around us is getting closer to our community, our host community, developing, because I'm into creative, I'm into acting, where we know how we move it. This is not about schools anymore. This is not about academics anymore. This is about grassroots. Those people on the street doesn't know anything about apartheid. They don't know the amount of money Nigeria gives South Africa. None of their business. These are the people we are dealing with. We are not dealing with people of high understanding of high class. We
All
are
right,
dealing with
thank you very
locals.
much. This has
Anyway,
been emphasized
thank you,
earlier on.
leaders. I think this will be a conversation of some other.
Okay. Philinde, shall we have you? Philinde and Philinde. No, Philinde, let's have your response now, and then it will be Dr. Franco Yekwelu, and this session is closed. Thank you. Yes.
Sorry, have my response to some of the questions that have been answered now?
Okay, are you done?
Yeah, I think yeah.
Okay, Dr. Reverend Frank Onyenkwelu, would you like to have the floor on a final note?
My final note is just to the Nigerian government. Irrespective of all that we've said and addressed here, I will encourage that Nigerian government show more solidarity to their citizens abroad, whether in South Africa, other African countries, or outside the shores of Africa. It's important that the diasporans will be ensured, convinced that our government cares about our safety, our protection, how we are treated outside the borders of Nigeria, and our well-being as much as that. Boycotting may not be the answer, but that is all in getting government's attention to where we are and what we are going through. That will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Professor Busari, would you be making an intervention? Because I saw you at some point. Professor Busari, please, we're ready now. Professor Dauda Busari. If he's not coming up, I would like to, at this point, thank all our discussants and other participants among the audience for being so cooperative in making this inaugural edition of our Burning Issues a success. Certainly, there are takeaways. The fact that we all have to come together as one Africa. Respective nations have to do their bit in facilitating development, and there is the need for reorientation about Pan-Africanism and the protocols that the African Union has facilitated have to be implemented across these nations. And of course, Nigeria, as well as other sending countries, have to also do a lot more in ensuring the protection of their citizens in other countries. With this, I would like to say we have come to a successful end of the conversation today. We are grateful to you once again for everything. We hope to see everybody again when we come your way again with another edition of Burning Issues at the African Diaspora Resource and Research Center, University of Ibadan.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof, for well managed discussion. I'd like to thank everyone for being here. Just to say that please visit our website adrrc.org. You can subscribe to our newsletter. YouTube page is also available. All the videos, recordings of our monthly seminar and burning series will be there. You can continue the discussion there. Obviously, you can see we are unable to take a lot of the comments, so people find this discussion interesting and they are really invested in it. So the conversation can continue at that comment section, and then we take this forward from our part. But just to say that we really appreciate you. We are thankful for making the time to discuss and be part of this wonderful audience. So with that, I say again, thank you and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye.
very much.
Research coordinator.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you for coming, Cindy.
Thank you, everyone.
Canada
Thank
today.
you.
Thank you, Reverend Oyekulu.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you
Martin.
so much.